Hello and welcome to Eduflow. You're probably here because you're looking for a training tool. Perhaps it's for new hire training or some sort of internal training. And today I'll show you how Eduflow works. So we'll take a look at both the instructor view as well as what learners will see. And we'll also cover a few things that pertain to administrator roles in Eduflow, and that'll help with course and user management. So let's get started here. We'll first take a look at the instructor view, and the first thing you'll notice is your dashboard. So I'm logged in here, and you can see all the courses that I'm a part of and all the courses that I've created before. In terms of how courses are organized, you'll find them under your own institution. Think of this as your home folder. You can add other instructors and administrators if you'd like to share material, and we'll cover more on this later. So going back to courses, today we'll create a really simple training program just to show you how to get started here. And so the first thing I'll do is I'll go ahead and click this big blue button, create course, and I'm going to go ahead and create an empty course here. So let's give this a title, Training 101. And today I want to add just two different activities, and these are commonly used activities for training programs. And so before I add those, just to kind of cover everything that we see in a course in Eduflow, on the left-hand side here, we have the sidebar. It's basically a map of the course, all the different activities that learners will have to complete. And towards the top here, you have summary and participants. So summary will give you a report on who has completed what activities are still incomplete. And if you'd like to, you can also provide extensions for specific activities, deadline extensions. Under the participants tab, this is where you'll go ahead and add learners to your program. Right now, it's just me, the course owner, but there's several ways to invite learners to your program. Either you can do this manually or by passing a CSV here. You can also just provide a link to the course. So if you have some sort of knowledge center where employees can visit and perhaps self-enroll into programs, feel free to just drop that link in there and they'll be able to enroll into this training program. So going back to the course and adding our first activity here, the first one is pretty commonly used and it's a pretty simple activity. It's what we call a content activity. And you'll see under this description here, you can use the content activity to provide links for learners to follow, videos or text, or even attachments for them to download and for them to review. So I'm going to first add this to my program. And as I add this, you'll notice that it populates here on the left-hand side, the sidebar. And let's just go ahead and rename this activity. We'll call it Introduction. And under the content here, this is what learners will see when they click on the activity. And so I'll just give a kind of a brief summary. Welcome to your training program. And towards the bottom here, there are a set of rules that I could utilize. And these rules are really designed to help you manage the flow of your course. So which activities should be accessible by which student. You can control who gets to see what. You can even hide activities from learners until a specific date. Perhaps it's something that will be revealed to them after a specific stage. You also have prerequisites and deadlines. So with prerequisites, you can establish another activity as a requirement before learners can proceed to, let's say, for example, this activity here. Deadlines are really just a way to enforce learners to do their work on time. So there is a start date and an end date to that. So let's go ahead and just finish editing, add this to our course. And it's a pretty simple activity. Again, it's just a way to show information, to show content to learners. But we can explore, I would say, more collaborative activities, activities that really builds on engagement. So for example, we have things like Zoom meetings where you can host a live session, or perhaps even having learners go through a discussion with one another. But today we'll add a flow, a peer review flow. And we call it a flow because it essentially combines multiple different activities, and they're all related to one another. So for example, under this peer review flow, we can see that there is a submission activity, there is a peer review activity, and there is a feedback reflection activity. Now you can build this yourself by adding it individually, or you can just utilize one of our flows here. So let's just go ahead, add this to the course. And like before, we can go ahead and just rename this Untitled Peer Review Flow. We'll keep that for now. And we'll look at the first activity, which is submit your work. And so if I go to settings here, this is where I can add some more content. Imagine I'm asking my learners to submit something. So let's say right after the introduction to this training program, I wanted my learners to read through a piece of document. Perhaps it's a new employee handbook, for example. And so here I can tell my learners what I expect them to submit. Think of this as the assignment details, what is expected of them in order to complete this activity. So here I'll say, submit what you've learned from the employee handbook, just as an example. And you'll notice down here, we see a similar set of rules, but there's some other settings that we can toggle here. So for example, under submission settings, if I want my learners to just submit a text-based response, I can just uncheck these and only have the text editor selected. And so momentarily we'll take a look at that from the learner side, and you'll see that they'll have a text box to write in order to submit for this activity here. Similar to before, you can control who gets to see this activity. You can also set prerequisites and deadlines. We'll keep it simple for now, and we'll finish editing and move on to the next one here, which is the actual peer review activity. And so here, similar to before, you can utilize the content, the description area here to describe what you expect of learners. So taking that previous example where, let's say, my learners have gone through the introduction, they've read through the employee handbook, and they've submitted what they've learned. Here, I can now tell my learners what I expect from them in terms of peer review. What do I want them to discuss? And so you'll notice here, there's an area to select a source. And what that means is we're selecting a source in order to conduct peer reviews. Essentially, what are learners peer reviewing? Under this scenario, we see that they are peer reviewing the submit your work activity, which is the activity that comes before peer review here. And so we'll go ahead and finish editing and on to the next one, which is the peer feedback reflections. And so this is the third and final step for this peer review flow. And so at this point, learners have submitted their work, they've peer reviewed, and now I'm expecting them to respond to the feedback they've received. And so I won't go back into settings here, but you can imagine you can also add text here to help guide learners. But let's now take a look at what learners see from their end. So I'll go ahead and add a student here. Test student 1, test at testing Eduflow. And a pretty helpful tip, as you're building your course, you can add some of these fake students into your sandbox kind of practice course in order to see what it looks like for learners. So I'm going to add the student here. And once I add them in, I'll be able to log in as them to see what they see. And so for learners, you'll notice on the left side, in the sidebar here, we can see the learner progress. So an open circle means incomplete, and the lock symbols indicate that there's a prerequisite. So if you remember before, under the second activity for peer review, it's locked. It's locked because I, as a learner in this training program, I haven't submitted my work yet. So if we start from this first one, the introduction, let's say there's a wall of text here that I've just read through. I'll manually mark it as complete, and I get this green check mark. Now, if I move on to the next one here, you'll notice that the tweak that we made in terms of how learners can submit their work, they can only type in a text box. We can see how learners can directly provide their responses. So let's just say this is what I've learned today, 1, 2, and 3. And once I'm done providing my response, I'll go ahead and submit, and I get a green check mark. So this is pretty much how Eduflow works in terms of having learners go through activities throughout the training program. Again, every single one of these activities, you can have a start date and end date. You can set prerequisites. You can even control which activities should be available for which learners. And so if we think about different groups of learners, we can better control kind of what their learning path is. So I'm going to go ahead and stop impersonating that fake student, and we'll head back over to my dashboard here. And what I want to show you is the administrative tools to help better manage users. Those are both instructors and learners, but also how to manage your courses, your training programs. And so you may remember from before I mentioned that I have my own institution here. And so one thing that we do for our enterprise partners is that we'll offer a sandbox institution. You can treat this as a testing ground before you launch courses. If you just write to us, we'll be happy to set one up for you. But if you notice, when I click on the home button here, I'm part of several institutions, but I also have my own dashboard. And so under this dashboard, I'll be able to see who is a part of my institution. I can see all the different administrators, all the different instructors, teaching assistants, and learners as well. And from this panel, I can go ahead and add and remove participants. For courses, this gives me complete visibility into all of the courses that are associated with my institution. And so I can, for example, invite another instructor, I can invite another administrator. They can create their own training program that's under my institution, and I'll be able to see all the courses they've created. Subscription, this is really just a quick way in order to add additional licenses. And one of the benefits there is, depending on which license type that you have, you'll be able to tap into some additional features. So here we can see we're just naming the institution. This is available to everyone. But we also have API access and other integrations with Zapier. So, for example, if you wanted to connect Eduflow with another tool, perhaps you receive a specific type of notification when learners submit their work or provide a review, as an example, or they complete a specific activity. You can use Zapier and connect that with Eduflow. I would also encourage you to take a look at our API. We have some documentation in terms of what types of API calls you can make and what types of data you can pull from Eduflow. And another area in order to kind of customize Eduflow to reflect your brand and to reflect perhaps some of the other tools that you're using, we also have a way to change logos and the color scheme. And so you can see you can upload your own logo, which will replace our Eduflow logo in the nav bar here. And you can also change the color scheme, border radius, and even font family. So these are some of the features that are available to our enterprise partners. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you.